The dismembered body of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez was discovered in the front trunk of David's Tesla Model X on September 8, 2025. The vehicle had been towed 3 days prior from 1405 Bluebird Avenue, which was parked approximately 400 feet from David's home at 1368 Donny Place in the Hollywood Hills. Surveillance video and other evidence confirmed the defendant, aka David, was the last person to drive the vehicle on July 29, 2025, before he left Los Angeles on a concert tour. These are the opening statements of the pretrial brief that the district attorney filed against David for his court hearing on April 29th. This brief provides an exact roadmap of when prosecutors believe David took Celeste's life, how he did it, what his whereabouts were after the murder took place, how he ended up mutilating Celeste, and what deranged incentive he may have had to go through with this horrendous act in the first place. I've covered this case pretty extensively on the channel, but as David now sits in court, the details that are revealed not only provide context to exactly what happened to Celeste, but also reveal a lot about David that is somehow much darker than we could have even imagined. How and where he met Celeste, the alleged CP that prosecutors found on David's iCloud, and the chainsaws that he allegedly ordered under a fake name around the time that prosecutors believe he took Celeste's life. Let's break it all down front to back. On September 8, 2025, the manager of the tow yard where the Tesla had been impounded noted the strong smell of decay and the presence of flies coming from the vehicle. He notified the LAPD Hollywood auto detectives, who determined the Tesla was registered to David through departmental resources. At the tow yard, LAPD detectives opened the Tesla's front storage compartment and observed a black cadaver bag covered in insects. Inside the bag, they discovered a severely decomposed head and torso. A plastic garbage bag beneath the black cadaver bag contained the dismembered arms and legs. However, the victim's ring and pinky fingers on her left hand had been amputated and were not found in the Tesla. On September 16th, 2025, just about a week later, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Department positively identified the body from dental records as belonging to the victim, Celeste. Pursuant to their investigation, LAPD robbery homicide detectives determined that Celeste and David had met in January 2022 when she was just 11 years old. They began a S relationship in November 2023 when Celeste was just 13 and David was 18. Detectives learned that Celeste had been reported missing to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department by her family, who live in Lake Elsinore, in February and April of 2024. Now later in this video, we're going to go into depth on what private investigator Steve Fisher has uncovered in terms of Celeste's family's knowledge on Celeste's relationship with David back in 2024, and if she had really even ran away in the first place, or if the family had just reported her missing to cover their tracks. Steve Fisher had been hired as a private investigator by the homeowner of the Hollywood mansion that David's manager had been renting, the very same mansion that prosecutors believe David took Celeste's life within. The owner of that house hired Steve Fisher to investigate and give them answers into who this person was living in their house that is potentially a PDF and a murderer. And Steve had uncovered some insane things allegedly about David, his own family, and potentially even Celeste's family. So we'll take a look at that later. Let's first break down the timeline of events that prosecutors believe led David to take Celeste's life. For now, what they're saying again is that they met when David was around 15 or 16 and Celeste was just 11, and they started having an S relationship 2 years later when Celeste was just 13. And just a couple months into their quote-unquote relationship, Celeste's parents would begin to file several missing persons reports, as Celeste was deemed as a runaway. One time that Celeste was reported missing, Riverside County Sheriff's Department ended up telephonically contacting David on February 17th, 2024, after they had identified a phone number in Celeste's phone records that belonged to David. During the phone call, David claimed that he had spoken to Celeste last on February 13th or February 14th, 2024, but he stated that he was unaware she was a minor or that she had been reported missing. Riverside County Sheriff's Department advised David that the LA Sheriff's Department would be visiting his home. On that day, David was living at 804 North Doney Place in West Hollywood. Riverside County Sheriff's Department requested that LA Sheriff's Department conduct a welfare check at David's home. The LA deputies went to David's home that night at 8:15 p.m. and informed him that Celeste was a 13-year-old runaway. David again claimed that he was unaware. So as you can see, David was actually warned way back in February of 2024 that Celeste was 13 and ran away from home. And not just warned by anyone, warned by authorities. Now, at the time, David would actually tell authorities that he had only met Celeste once in person in November of 2023. However, David showed deputies a yearbook photo of Celeste that he had on his cell phone. Although David had claimed to be unaware of where Celeste was at the time, she ended up returning home 2 days later. So basically, she goes missing in February. Authorities find out that she has David's number in her cell phone, so they go to David's house for a wellness check, inform him that she's underage and that she ran away. David pretends that he didn't know any of this, but then admits that he has a photo of her yearbook picture in his phone. So it's likely he knew what grade she was in, and mysteriously, just a couple days later, Celeste ends up returning back home after quote-unquote running away. Now here's where things get darker. Despite being informed by law enforcement that Celeste was only 13, David continued to pursue her. After Celeste returned home in February 2024, her parents took her cell phone away. David drove to Lake Elsinore and paid $1,000 to a junior high school student who was in the same class as Celeste. And he paid this kid $1,000 so that the kid would basically give Celeste a cell phone that David had purchased so that him and Celeste can stay in contact. This is what the prosecutors are claiming allegedly happened. Just a reminder that everything in this timeline and in this video is alleged and what the prosecutors are claiming. David is currently maintaining his innocence. Throughout 2024, Celeste would allegedly spend a significant amount of time with David, including summer weekends at his home in the Hollywood Hills and traveling with him to Las Vegas, London, and Texas to meet his family. Now, what's deeply disturbing about this is that around this time period, David did an interview where he specifically named traveling to those places with 3 different friends to record music. So these timelines completely line up with the words that David himself had spoke.
I used to do a lot of different projects with different producers, and I went through maybe 5 or 6 different versions of this album. I went to London for 2 weeks with 3 of my friends, and we just made a song every day for 2 weeks in London. I love London because of like the gloomy aesthetic and the gloomy just like vibe and environment that London has. Like there's barely any sun there, and I love that because the music I make is really sad. And then so 2 weeks I made a song every day, came out with half the album, and then I went back to Houston for another 2 weeks, and I made the rest of the project on my phone just off of beats that people sent me and with some things that I make. And I just spent 2 weeks in a different area trying to get myself in a different mindset, and then I came back to Houston, put myself in the same mindset again, and made everything by myself. So I wanted to see what I looked like or how I worked with different people and how I worked with myself, you know.
Also, notice how prosecutors are claiming that Celeste had actually traveled to these places to meet David's family. David's family lived in Texas, and that's one of the places prosecutors named that Celeste had visited with David. Now, we're going to go into the private investigator Steve Fisher's interview in more detail later in this video, but I want to bring in this clip where he claims that David's family knew and were completely complicit in the relationship that David was building with this child.
Do you personally think, or do you know, like, actually, that people knew her age and just didn't say anything about it?
100%. Listen, in that Discord of his, there's people that openly talk about it. They're like, hey, are you still going out with the underage girl? Are you still there talking about Epstein Island? Are you and Celeste going to Epstein Island? Like, it's crazy how open, it was not a secret, you know? And the people close to him in his orbit, listen, they knew. I mean, there's live streams where, not just the one with Celeste, but there's ones where he's talking to these 2 super young girls on like I don't know what platform it was, but he's talking to them, and his friend Asia Collins is behind him, and he's laughing about the age of these girls, and he's gooning, and it's really frustrating because they have not they didn't race forward with information. They waited to the last minute to save themselves. All of a sudden, we find out one of his friend Neo has to be arrested to be brought in front of the grand jury. That's not how it should be. You shouldn't be. I don't care how close you were with this guy. If you got information, we're talking about a child.
The prosecutor's timeline continues by saying that text exchanges between David and Celeste contain references to sex, pregnancy, abortion, and use of the Plan B emergency contraceptive. There's also explicit photographs documenting and corroborating their S relationship. In November 2024, David and Celeste had broken up, although they continued to communicate, and text messages suggest they also continued to have S relations. What's deeply disturbing about this is that TMZ has recently reported that Celeste's death certificate has been updated. And while the prosecutors claim that her text conversations with David include discussing pregnancy, Celeste's death certificate now says that it's unknown whether or not she was actually pregnant when she passed away. Knowing this now makes the situation so much darker because, again, prosecutors claim that a big incentive David had for taking Celeste's life was the fact that she was jealous of other girls that David was seeing and threatened to go to authorities to expose that he was having S relations with her when she was 13. Prosecutors believe David then took her life in protection of his own career and reputation, basically so that she couldn't expose the truth. But how much darker is this situation if we now don't even know whether or not Celeste was possibly carrying David's child at the time that he allegedly took her life? April 23rd, 2025 is the likely date that Celeste lost her life and when all her cellular activity had ceased. The night before, April 22nd, 2025, David and Celeste engaged in a lengthy argument described in detail in their text messages. The messages reveal Celeste's jealousy over David's relationships with other women, as David led her to believe they had a future together. She became extremely upset and threatened to disclose damaging information about her relationship with David to end his career and destroy his life. David's first studio album was due to be released just 2 days after prosecutors believe he took Celeste's life. April 25th, 2025. David had an emerging multi-million-dollar career already in progress. He also had multiple product endorsements which were highly profitable. Basically, he had a lot to lose. At around 8:40 p.m. on April 23rd, David sent an Uber to transport Celeste from her Lake Elsinore home to his house. They communicated before and during her Uber ride, which dropped her off at David's Hollywood Hills home around 10:10 p.m. So it took around an hour and a half that she was in this Uber all alone at the age of 14 years old. At approximately 10:30 p.m., David sent text messages to Celeste inquiring where she was. The people contend this was part of David's premeditated plan to cover up the murder, as she was already dead by that time. Basically, they're claiming that she took an Uber and arrived to David's house at 10:10, but he sent a text to her phone asking where she was 20 minutes after she already arrived to his house to basically cover his tracks and make it seem like he had no idea where she was. Knowing he had to silence Celeste before she ruined his music career, as she had threatened already, very soon after Celeste's arrival to his house, David would stab her multiple times until she lost her life, and he stood by while she bled. At no time did he call law enforcement or 911 to take her to an emergency room to attempt to save her life. Despite knowing that she lost her life and her family was trying to find her, the evidence will show that David lied and claimed he didn't know where she was. In fact, David drove to Santa Barbara County immediately after Celeste had passed away, attempting to dispose of her property and destroy the evidence. At approximately 11:30 p.m. on April 23, 2025, the day that prosecutors believe David took Celeste's life, David drove away from his home as he texted and called Celeste's phone asking where she was. Like they mentioned before, these were acts that were calculated and planned to set up David's defense within a very short timeline after Celeste's vicious murder. David drove his Tesla north on the 101 freeway to San Marcos Pass Road, near Lake Cachuma in Santa Barbara County. He returned home early the following morning on April 24th, 2025, before going to a radio interview for the release of his album that week. He sent 2 additional texts to Celeste's phone that day, which obviously went unanswered because she was already dead. After April 26, 2025, David never attempted to contact her again. Now, what's extremely disturbing here is, not only the fact that prosecutors believe, again, it was on the 23rd of April that he took her life, and he's continuously texting her phone to make it seem like he's in search of her for the next 3 days, and then completely stops texting that phone number after the 26th. Like, all activity just stops, showing that this was an obvious attempt to, conjure up fake activity, making it seem like he didn't know where she was. What's also even more disturbing is in a previous video, which I'll leave a link to in the description of this video, I spoke about how David had a lot of social media activity from the 23rd of April up until around the 5th of May, which is the date that prosecutors believe he actually came back to LA and mutilated Celeste. In that time period, he was promoting this brand new album. He had release parties, pop-up shows, tons of social media activity. But one thing that went unnoticed that the prosecutors bring up here is that he actually went and did an interview the morning after they believe he took Celeste's life. The morning of April 24th, 2025, a day after Celeste had lost her life allegedly, and a day before David's new album would release. And this interview that he does here is so deeply disturbing, especially knowing that he may possibly have taken the life of a child who was just 14 the night before. And here he is the next morning with a massive smile on his face, talking about his breakout hit Romantic Homicide and how the violent, disgusting subjects of death and violent breakups had disgusted his mom so badly to the point where David knew that this song would create a splash. That's the reason why he claims in this interview, a day after prosecutors believe he took Celeste's life, his explanation in this interview as to why he released a song talking about a girl dying in the back of his mind is because his mom was disgusted by the dark subject matter.
Like when I used to get up and get dressed for school in the morning, I put on this cool fit. She would like, take that off, put on a suit or something like that, I knew it was cool if she hated it. I played it for her in the car, and she was like, David, this song is too violent. You're talking about killing people in your music? No, not my son. And I was like, wait, I might be onto something, bro. So I dropped it right after that. And it went crazy. TikTok, viral, 1 million views overnight. I was like, oh yeah, we cooking, boy. We cooking, boy. So right at that moment, I was like, my mom has done it again. Because if she said, because I was already skeptical about the song when I made it. Like, I was like, okay, maybe it's just too dark, I don't know what I'm doing. I held on to it for a minute until I decided to play it for my mom, and she hated it, and that was my cue. That was the you go do it. So after that, it was just like, it was history, man.
In this interview, he also says he was extremely sad at the time of recording this song. And if you guys didn't know, David was actually homeschooled for a large chunk of his teenage years. He says that took a toll on him, that he was in isolation for many key developmental years of his life, and that he wrote Romantic Homicide because he wanted to experience those relationships, that heartbreak, that love that he discusses in the song, because he never had it, because he was all alone. And psychologically, in a deeply deranged way, maybe all that social isolation in those early teenage years stunted David's social and emotional development and made him feel almost stuck, or left a void that made him desire the relationships with these younger teens that he was never able to actually have when he was a younger teen himself. This, of course, would not be any sort of excuse in the slightest for David pursuing Celeste romantically. And I'm not anything close to a psychiatrist, psychologist, doctor, nothing, but just kind of putting the pieces together based off what David says here. Maybe being isolated and homeschooled for all those key developmental years had a darker effect on David's psyche than anyone could have known.
Were you sad at the time of making it?
I was. I mean, dude, homeschooling really takes a toll on a kid. Like,
Isolation.
yeah. I made a couple friends now that were homeschooled, but they had like these groups that they would go to like bi-weekly and just to socialize. But I didn't have that. Like, there was no like extracurricular activities I was involved in it was just me at home playing Fortnite, getting schoolwork done, learning how to code and build computers for 4 years. 4 years. So yeah, man, romantic homicide was just like, I wanted to feel what the other kids were feeling. Like everybody I knew, well, in middle school that I didn't talk to anymore, everybody had relationships. I didn't have a relationship. I wanted to do that. I wanted to be involved in this or have a heartbreak for myself. So I kind of just like made up these scenarios of myself getting heartbroken and being in love and stuff like that. And I would write songs about things that never happened. And that would just become my life. 4 years, man.
Now, as far as how David actually carried out not just the act of taking Celeste's life, but also cutting up her remains and attempting to dispose of them, prosecutors actually reveal more information on why they believe it was David who did this and how they think he actually went about doing so. On the day after taking Celeste's life, April 24th, 2025, David had purchased tools to carry out his plot to dismember and dispose of Celeste's body. He ordered a shovel from Home Depot that was delivered to his house from Postmates, and on May 1st, 2025, David ordered and subsequently Amazon delivered 2 chainsaws to his home. On May 5th, 2025, David ordered and Amazon delivered a body bag, heavy-duty laundry bags, and a blue inflatable pool to his home. He made these purchases under the fake name Victoria Mendez, and on May 8th, 2025, defendant returned to the same area in Santa Barbara County, leaving his home around 11:30 p.m. This is the area that prosecutors had said a couple weeks before when he initially took Celeste's life. He went to this area to dispose of her belongings. David returned back to that area on May 31st, 2025. It's an isolated site off State Route 154 where Celeste's identification was subsequently discovered in January 2026. Remember again, David was going to this area to dispose of her belongings. Well, in January 2026, prosecutors claimed that they had found an ID on this highway that belonged to Celeste. Additionally, on July 7th, 2025, David ordered and Amazon delivered a quote-unquote burn cage to his home under the fake name Victoria Mendez as part of his plan to incinerate the evidence. And there had been long-standing rumors that David had a burn cage in his house. Prosecutors are claiming that that's true and it's something David ordered off Amazon in July of 2025, almost 3 months after taking Celeste's life. Also, David took horrifying measures to destroy and discard Celeste's body. After placing her body into the blue inflatable pool to prevent her blood from spilling onto his garage floor, David used a chainsaw and perhaps other tools to separate her limbs. Small blue plastic fragments were found embedded in Celeste's remains, which were collected by the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Department. The fragments were analyzed by the LAPD's Forensic Science Division, and an expert was able to make a physical fit match from the blue fragments to the blue inflatable pool that was purchased by David in May of 2025. In an attempt to distance himself from Celeste, David amputated her left ring and pinky fingers because her ring finger contained a tattoo of his name. Her fingers have still not been found. David then placed her head and torso into the cadaver bag that he purchased, and he put her limbs into a garbage bag, which he then placed into the front trunk of the Tesla, and then laid the cadaver bag, which contained her head and torso, on top of that. For several weeks, as David would hit higher heights in his career, or quite possibly even months as he left out on tour, David left Celeste's body to decompose inside that Tesla. He lied to friends, business associates, and others who noticed the strong smell of decay in and around his home and the car. So his friends actually noticed the smell that was coming from the car. It was so strong that it infiltrated into the house, and you'll see the private investigator speak more on that later in this video. But before David left town for his tour in July, he parked his Tesla on the street around the corner from his home. Now, what's absolutely mind-boggling to me is the fact that David really thought he can get away with this when friends, family members, business partners were complaining about a smell all the way from his home while the car containing the body was parked on the street. That's how strong that smell was. And David still thought that people cared so little about this innocent child that no one cared or knew enough about her whereabouts to inquire far enough to the point where they would find her in a car that literally belongs to David. Think about that. Think about how many people had failed this young child. The fact that they knew that she was dating a guy named David, the fact that she would constantly run away and was seen with David, the fact that authorities in February of 2024 had went to David's home in relation to this relationship that he was trying to have with this child, and yet still he was able to get away with taking her life and hiding her remains in a car that belonged to him, that was registered under his name. And all these people around him allegedly knew that there was a connection between David and Celeste, but yet her remains were able to rot away for months in this car that belonged to David. LAPD served a search warrant to David's home on September 17th, 2025, after Celeste was identified by the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner on September 16th. Inside the garage, detectives discovered evidence consistent with the dismemberment of Celeste's body in the inflatable pool, which contained multiple linear cuts. Several biological samples, which tested positive for blood, were collected within the garage area. DNA analysis determined that various samples matched Celeste's unique genetic profile. So basically, all the way back in September, the LAPD had searched that garage that they believe Celeste had lost her life within by the hands of David, and they found blood in that garage area that matched Celeste's genetic profile, as well as evidence of that inflatable pool where they believe he dismembered her body within. On December 9th, 2025, the medical examiner ruled that Celeste's death was a homicide caused by 2 penetrating injuries to the torso. And on January 17th, 2025, Celeste's U.S. passport card was found by a Caltrans worker off State Road 154 in Santa Barbara County. Remember, this was around the time when Celeste was continuously running away from her home and allegedly going to visit David. Someone at the time had found her passport on the highway. Then they get into some of the evidence that they have against David, and this is really where, if you thought it was dark already, it gets a whole other level of disgusting within this list of, what the state has obtained as evidence from their searches of David's home, etc. So the first thing they have is description of photographs that depict Celeste naked, as well as while she was engaged in acts with David when she was 13. And obviously this falls under being classified as CSAM, aka corn, but not the food, related to children. And it also proves that David and Celeste had an S relationship while she was 13, right? There's also allegedly numerous text messages between David and Celeste evidencing their S relationship, pregnancy, abortion, the use of Plan B, messages in March of 2025 that prove David continued to manipulate Celeste because she allegedly messaged him, "All we do is have sex and just hang out, man. I want more than that for myself." And these were allegedly obtained from David's own iCloud. Along with those text messages, they also have David's cellular activity and all the communications that derive from his phone and his Tesla that basically track his activity from the dates between April 22nd, 2025 and April 24th, 2025, the day before and the day after and the day of that he allegedly took Celeste's life. Also including a trip that he allegedly took to Santa Barbara County in the middle of the night after Celeste had arrived to his Hollywood Hills home. They also claim to have surveillance video of David driving his Tesla on July 29th, 2025, around 3 months after they believe he took Celeste's life. And this would be the last time he drove the car before parking the vehicle and leaving for tour at the end of July. Never forget how easily David thought he would have gotten away with this case. Not only did he hide the body allegedly in his car, but he was also touring after authorities had actually found the body within his car. He stopped touring multiple days after September 8th, which was the date that authorities found Celeste in the vehicle. They also found the DNA evidence that was developed from bloodstains collected in David's garage, which, like I mentioned before, actually matched Celeste's genetic profile. And they got proof of David ordering off of Amazon multiple things they believe were used in the unaliving and the mutilation of Celeste, which include chainsaws, a body bag, inflatable pool, heavy-duty laundry bags, and a quote-unquote burn cage, all after April 24th, 2025. Under a different moniker, a different name. Aside from that, they also have proof that he purchased a shovel from Home Depot that arrived to his house on April 24th, the day after they believe he took Celeste's life. And they have proof that he purchased an Uber, which picked up Celeste from her Lake Elsinore home and transported her to David's house on April 23rd. At the hearing, they're also going to, showcase evidence that proves David had a lucrative career before April 23rd, 2025. Because again, they believe his incentive for taking Celeste's life was that she was trying to destroy his career by coming forward to authorities and to the public about their relationship. They're also going to show how the day after he allegedly unalived Celeste, he had a release party for his album, the very same night after he took Celeste's life allegedly, and then embarked on an international tour which only ended days after authorities already found Celeste's body in the Tesla. And even more than that, authorities claim that throughout the trial there's going to be evidence shown that there are text messages between David and Celeste on the dates of April 22nd and 23rd, 2025, where Celeste threatens David to expose him and destroy his career. So they believe that it was the day before and of that he took Celeste's life that she was basically fighting with him via text messages, threatening to expose everything and destroy his life. And then he Ubers her from her house 90 minutes to his house, unalives her through 2 stab wounds, and then about a day or two later orders all this different equipment. Then he goes out and does interviews and album release parties and concerts, pretending like everything's normal, just promoting his album, comes back to LA from all these different, marketing campaigns and promo tours he was doing, and allegedly uses all that equipment that he ordered under a fake name to mutilate Celeste's body, put the remains in his Tesla, and park it a couple blocks away from the home he was renting, and just left it there while he went out on tour for the rest of the summer. Now again, all this took place in a home that David's manager, Josh Marshall, was actually renting. And like I mentioned before, the actual owner of that home hired a private investigator to basically get some answers on whether or not a murder had really taken place in this home and understand who was actually living in this home. Because again, LAPD, while they were conducting all this evidence and they had a grand jury that were, sifting through all this evidence, they were calling in witnesses. This took like months and months, from September all the way up until April of 2026 when they finally arrested David. And in that period, they didn't want information getting exposed, right? Because then the media spins it. So everything was under wraps. And because everything was kept silent, that's why this private investigator was hired by the owner of the home that David allegedly took Celeste's life in. Because LAPD, the authorities, they weren't giving her answers. So she wanted to know what exactly went down. Now, this private investigator recently did an interview and reveals a lot of information that adds an even deeper, haunting layer to this entire story.
Do you think the family is as quiet as they are because they knew who David was and they knew who she was going to, and you don't really see too much of an intervention between them?
I mean, yes. I have proof that family members have been to that rental house before. Have been with David and Celeste.
Wait, her family has been to his house?
Family members. Listen, one of the first things I put down in this case was a build. We know that David and Celeste were at Six Flags on a certain date, and we found a Build-A-Bear certificate from the Build-A-Bear place in Six Flags in her cousin's name at the house. And so it's like, wait a minute. So she wasn't really missing. You want to know, in my opinion, what the missing persons report was about? It was to cover their ass so CPS didn't come in and say, "Hey, she's not going to school. What's up?" If she's a missing person, you say she's not going to the school because she's a missing person. Then you don't have CPS in your life at that moment. Listen, I sympathize. I know that they are. I know that they're grieving. I know they lost a daughter, but goddamn, she shouldn't have been allowed to be. She was gone a year and a half, man. A year and a half. Like, somebody should have said, maybe we shouldn't be letting Celeste live her own life like this.
This is what's incredibly insane to me, right? The entire time that Celeste has these missing persons posters being plastered all over her hometown, this detective is claiming that her parents knew the entire time that she kept leaving the house, skipping school, leaving town to go be with David. He claims that her cousins Build-A-Bear receipts were found in David's house, allegedly. If you guys watched my previous videos on the case, then you know that there were times in as recent as September of 2024 that Celeste was back at her family's home. But yet, these missing persons reports had gone up since April of 2024, months before that September time when she was caught on security camera footage, back safely at the home. Now, Steve also claims that it wasn't just David's family, it wasn't just Celeste's family that knew about this relationship. Like the prosecutors had stated, they believe David had actually went and gave $1,000 to a kid who was in Celeste's class so that he can give Celeste a cell phone so she can continue communicating with David. Well, Steve Fisher, the private investigator, he believes that a lot of people within Celeste's circle, whether it's classmates, neighbors, teachers, whatever the case is, people within their town had known about this relationship.
Could you see potential charges being pressed on the parents?
I think it's too high profile of a case, right? So they're going to say, oh shit, if we do that, we're going to have a certain amount of the people that are going to be like, I don't care if what they did is wrong. You got to give them some space because they're a grieving family, and they are. But they've also got to be like, hey, we messed up, we messed up. I think there's going to be financial transactions that come out in this if this goes to trial, they're going to show that there were people that were getting money, and it's going to look really, really bad.
So, oh my gosh, man, I did not, because I was under the impression that they might have known that she was with him, but there wasn't anything. But you have verifiable evidence to show that. And when you say family members, you don't have to disclose who, but are these adult family members that would have a say in her life?
Yeah. So, like the one, and her name's already been put out there, Esmeralda, is a cousin who was a senior in high school. But I'm not so much blaming her. But the thing is that Esmeralda's parents, who would be her aunt and stuff like that, knew. Listen, I have other proof I can't disclose, but yes, there was adults. There was several people in her family that knew. Listen, her mom admitted she knew she was dating a guy named David, and she said, "Oh, I didn't really." She knew who it was. I mean, he would come out there and pick her up, in the Tesla. They knew she'd been found there, before. Police knew that she was with him at some point before that, because listen, the person that sent the email to his management saying, word is that she's with David. If that's true, please make sure she comes home. She's 13 years old. They only knew to send that to his manager because it was no secret in Lake Elsinore, where she lived, that she was with David.
No, it's not just this private investigator that believes other people within Lake Elsinore knew about what was going down between David and Celeste. Before that, there were other people that broke down different comments that were found online from people who claimed to be living in Lake Elsinore that said this was a known thing within the community, within Celeste's friend group, within her family. And they take it a step further and say allegedly the family was actually receiving money from David to basically stay silent on the whole matter.
We may now have evidence that Celeste's family knew about her relationship with David and allowed it. And this comment from 2024 is getting a lot of attention. So someone in Celeste's community commented on a post saying, "I live in Lake Elsinore, 5 to 10 minutes away. There was so much more going on. Her family knew he was with her since she was 11. They didn't care. All they cared for was the money given to them." She said, unfortunately, she was reported missing in 2024, but they all knew where she was. Even her friends extorted David with money so they wouldn't say where she was staying. I think the mom should be held responsible too for allowing a child to move in with a boyfriend at that age. There's a lot more than what's being said. Here in Elsinore, all her friends are talking about it because she was in communication with them. So sad. She said she would sneak out at age 11 even though her neighborhood is horrible, but her parents saw that he had money and became more dependent and would let her leave the house at 13 even though he was 18. She said her mother sold her for $10K a week and he paid so that he wouldn't be seen as a which does add up with their Discord messages of her complaining about her parents and him saying, "Don't worry, I'll fix it." And the other crazy thing is that people found this comment on one of David's videos back in 2024 where someone named Robin River said he's waiting on the cops to get David for messing with minors. This is long before many of us knew about him and Celeste would be around 13 at that time. Since then, his account has blown up and people are waiting and hoping that whoever this is gives us some answers. Rest in peace to Celeste. Let me know what you guys think, and as anything comes out, I'll keep you guys updated.
Now, the news of Celeste running away, meeting David, living at David's house, doing live streams with him, this not only spread far, but it got to a point where people from her hometown had actually contacted David's manager and David himself in email saying that, hey, this child has not been in school recently. She's a runaway. Her parents don't know where she is. Please bring her back. We have reason to believe that you might know where she is.
She has these series of runaway events, but it was no secret that she was with him. In fact, somebody close to the situation, her family, the school where she was going, wrote his management by email and said, paraphrasing it, there's a rumor that David might be involved in the disappearance of 13-year-old, Celeste Rivas Hernandez. If that's true, please make sure she gets home quickly. And she got home. She arrived the next day. And that email was received by his management company, and they did send it to him. I have proof of that. He was aware of it. So then she arrives back home, but then she runs away again. He was grooming her. He's a predator. And this is not the only girl he was involved with that was underage. When Celeste ran away on Valentine's Day, she showed up in the area. Oh, this is the exact same day that they're actually taking possession of the new house that they rented, my client's house.
Yes, sir.
Of course, my client doesn't. My client thinks it's Josh Marshall, his manager, but they take possession of it. So on that day, he's got Celeste runs away that day, and she's at the old house, the one where they did that live stream, delete everything. And he's got another minor at the new house, a mile and a half away. And I've got pictures of that.
This is kind of all new about there being like a new minor. If you can reveal, how old was this other minor that David was dealing with?
She was 16 and 17.
She was 16.
This was going on for a while. I believe it goes back to when she was 16, 17 for sure. But he knew, she was underage. And listen, it's kind of the same MO. It's kind of the preying on those that, he can manipulate out of their environment, and there's others. There's another one too. So, I mean, and I guarantee that I can't guarantee, but
no, any predator, they're always going to have multiple victims. Yes.
There's ones that I don't know about.
So you heard it from, again, the private investigator who the homeowner that David allegedly took Celeste's life in hired to get some answers on the situation. He states himself that not only did people around both Celeste and David know about the situation, not only was David and his management team asked to return Celeste to her hometown, but allegedly David also had other children in his presence at the homes he was staying in. Steve Fisher also went to the first court hearing and saw David stare blankly at the prosecutor while she read aloud to the entirety of the courtroom that they found large amounts of explicit imagery on David's devices, leading Steve to believe that not only were there probably several victims, several children beyond Celeste, but also that David has accepted his fate. That even if he beats the homicide charge, there's no getting around the fact that he's a complete predator.
When I was in court yesterday, when I happened to be looking right at David, he was seated kind of in front of me, and they brought him in an orange jumpsuit, and they sat him down at the table. They were talking about when discovery, which is all the evidence and stuff, is going to be delivered to his lawyers, and
yes, sir.
And the prosecutor comes out, and I don't want to get you dinged off.
No. It's literally say like you can
say that. Okay. So she comes out and says, Your Honor, one of the biggest issues is that there on his phone there was a voluminous amount of child porn. Proper word now is CSAM, right? But she went child porn, and then she goes, and because of this child porn, she said child porn 4 times in a row. It was very intentional. You had to let him know we know. He just stared straight ahead. He wasn't like, he didn't turn to his lawyer and like, what the hell? You know, he knew, like, I think he knows that they got him dead to rights right now. So, but she made it sound like there's a lot on there. So I don't think it's just Celeste. I don't think it's just Celeste and this other minor that I'm talking about. I think that there's going to be a lot that he actually was in communication with, and I think there's going to be probably a lot of that material that he sought out on the internet.
And Steve, this private investigator, doubles down on the fact that he really doesn't believe that the parents were out of the loop on this, that Celeste was even a runaway to begin with. He thinks that they knew where she was. They knew her whereabouts. Like I mentioned before, there was footage of her arguing with neighbors in her family's neighborhood in September 2024. This was months after she was, quote-unquote, a missing person. There was other footage of her in the summer of 2024. Like, there was several instances where Celeste was back in her hometown after she was declared missing. Steve believes the whole, reporting her as a missing person was just to get Child Protective Services off their back if they found out that, Celeste wasn't in school. And that would mean something darker was going on beyond just this being, David pursuing this child. Steve, the investigator, he's talking about, David's managers getting contacted about this. The prosecutors are saying that David was paying Celeste's classmates to get her phones. Now here Steve is talking about, David's parents, Celeste's parents allegedly knew about this entire situation. Like, how far did this really go? How many people were here failing this child in real time?
Getting into around Valentine's Day, she runs away again. And then it's a year. It's well over a year that she's gone before we now know that this happened, according to prosecutors, in April of 2025. So she's gone a very long time. And that's been the whole thing, is piecing this together. Where exactly was she? Because we didn't really have evidence that we had evidence that she had been to the house, but not that she was like living at the house. And David would travel a lot for concerts or whatever, and nobody would stay there. So we're like, where was she in all this time? And then we find out that she wasn't truly a runaway. That's the part that's upsetting to me too, is that her family knew where she was. She'd shown up for like her cousin's high school graduation. She showed up at a family event. There's a video out there of her arguing with the next door neighbors in the apartment complex next to her house, all while she's supposedly a missing person. And so it's all very frustrating. There's a lot of things, a lot of failures around her. And I understand she's probably a handful. I get that. But the thing is, she's a kid. That's part of being a parent. She needed direction, she needed like a direction in life. And it's not okay. They knew who he was. And it's just, I don't care how rich he is. I don't care how famous he's becoming. I don't care he's living in a mansion and he can afford to support her. It's not okay. She's 13, 14 at this time. It's never okay.
Now, what's crazy is, talk about, this being a known secret within David's circle, within Celeste's circle, that like everyone around them really knew about this stuff. And if these accusations are true, that David was a predator beyond just Celeste, you want to talk about all that? Look at this old footage that people found of someone next to David in a video talking about him dating a minor.
Are you still dating that minor? Are you still dating that minor?
Now, it's also so deeply disturbing, and we kind of looked at it before, but Steve actually, on his website, I reviewed it in a previous video, he did like a full timeline breakdown from the date that, prosecutors believe Celeste's life was taken by David, all the way 2 weeks later to after they believe he mutilated her body. In my previous video, we looked at it, but Steve had tracked basically all of David's social media activity and actual in-person activity, because right away when he took Celeste's life, allegedly, he was out partying, celebrating the release of his album, doing a ton of promo for it. It was nonstop. But then mysteriously, right after the quote-unquote alleged mutilation happens, Steve noticed in his investigation that David pretty much went silent for a decent chunk of time, like barely any social media posts, barely any activity, wasn't doing concerts or marketing or anything of the sort, which is a little disturbing. Like, you do all this promo for 1 week when your album just releases and then you stop talking about it completely. Like, he went pretty much silent. Just very disturbing.
If prosecutors are correct about the 23rd being the day, and I believe they are because there's somebody that obviously gave them the information, then within hours, he's fine. He's in a mindset where he's like, I'm ready to go to the party. I'm ready to go to New York. It's not affecting him. Now, we do see, it's kind of like this, almost like an adrenaline rush. There's all these posts and he's playing these shows and these pop-ups, but then there's like this crash. He goes somewhat a lot more silent, after the dismemberment. And he goes to Seoul, Korea for pop up, and he's in Malaysia. It's really wild to see that. So there's the murder and the dismemberment, and that. So our big questions are: where did he murder her? Where did he then store her for those 10 days or so until he dismembered her, 10 days or more? And then why does she end up in the Tesla? And why does she stay in the Tesla in his neighborhood?
Now, remember how earlier in this video when we were looking at what the prosecutors had to say as far as the timeline goes for when David actually took the life of Celeste and then went away, came back, eventually puts her in the Tesla. Like, they were saying that there's evidence that a lot of people were complaining about the smell. The smell was so strong coming from the car that it actually made its way into David's house. Well, Steve says he spoke to neighbors of that home that David was renting, because again, he's conducting this investigation on behalf of the owner of that home. And he says that the neighbors smelt it as well. They actually, one of them buried their dog that had passed away, and they thought that the smell was coming from the backyard where they had buried the dog. But they said once that Tesla moved away from their street, they didn't smell it anymore.
When I started interviewing with, before we knew all these data points, I was interviewing obviously neighbors, asking for video surveillance and whatnot. And, the people right across the street, directly across the street, and this is a neighborhood with very large houses and big yards and security systems and everything like that. And I was over at the house directly across the street, which is owned by a producer, and I was dealing with his estate manager. And she said, one of the dogs, so the property, it's a big property, and their fence line butts up to the road. David would often mostly time park the Tesla on their property line, off to the side of the road. So it butted up to their yard. And she said, we started getting this horrible smell, and one of the dogs had died, and they had buried the dog in the backyard, and it was like a husky, it was a larger dog. And she's like, anytime it would get over to be like 75, 76, 77 degrees, the backyard would smell horrible. She's like, so we thought we didn't bury the dog deep enough, so they were getting ready to unearth this dog and bury it deeper. And then all this happened, and the Tesla went away, and then everything was fine. But
so
that
when
dog
the Tesla got moved, did that smell go away, and was the dog still buried?
And, yes, and they're not thinking like, oh, the Tesla just went away and now it doesn't smell. They don't know, they're like, why it comes and goes. And it's not until after they find out, oh, there's a body in the trunk of the Tesla. It's like, oh my God. So if they smell it, then he really can smell it, especially at the house, because it's like a multi-story house. And there's live streams that he does where a makeup artist is like, oh, what's that smell, And they just kind of like.
When was these live streams like dated around?
He live streamed from the house a lot, and so it was just like him and his friends, and they're filming something or whatever. There's a makeup artist.
And this is the same house that.
Same house.
So there was streams where the makeup artist would complain about a smell from the house.
Yeah, and so what it is most likely is it's coming from the Tesla and just going up through the windows up in the third floor, and they're up in the master bedroom's bathroom when this happens, and he blames it on, I went to the bathroom, The whole thing is so wild. Like, if you dismember somebody, I know you never have. I'm just saying, but if somebody dismembers somebody, you think they'd go ahead and just get rid of them, right? Like, if they didn't do it at the house, if they did it somewhere, and I think they did do it somewhere else, I think he had to have refrigerated her.
When you said they, so do you think David had help?
I think he had help. I don't think he can do it by himself. I'm not saying in the murder itself, but I do think in the dismemberment, or at least the moving around, I think he had help. So, and I think people are going to fall for that. I think there's going to be other people that go down. I don't know why he didn't just get rid of the body. I don't think he'll ever say why he did it, and I don't think it'll ever come to that. But I think that the only thing I can think of was a trophy of sorts for him. And because listen, it's not that hard to go, you can drive 5 miles from that house and you'd be on Pacific Coast Highway and just let that Tesla go off into the ocean, off a cliff, or have somebody steal it and get rid of it, whatever, have it gone forever. He kept it in the neighborhood. He was moving it around when he dismembered her. People had reported to us that they noticed that it started being parked in different locations starting in May. And he's keeping it close by, and then he goes on tour and just leaves it there. I mean, I don't know what he was thinking. Like, there's got to be some sort of trophy thing, because there's plenty of opportunities to get rid of that car.
The thing that boggles my mind about this case the most is that you ask yourself, why did David leave the Tesla in the middle of the street, his own Tesla with his body? Why did he leave it next to the house that he was renting? Like, he just left everything there to get caught. Like he was almost asking to get caught. Some people will say, criminals, they'll do this subconsciously because they feel guilty and they want someone to catch them. Other people will say it's almost like they're rubbing it in your face. Like this is like a game to them and they're laughing about the fact that no one has caught them, right? Some people will say that these deranged criminals, like a Jeffrey Dahmer, like they'll keep evidence in plain sight because it's almost like a trophy to them. But the thing that drives me the most crazy about the situation is that, like we've reviewed in this video, it seems like so many people around Celeste knew about this troubling situation for years. They saw her run away from her hometown. She told her friends about her relationship problems with David. The mother allegedly told TMZ that she had a boyfriend named David. Apparently, it was known throughout the Lake Elsinore community, or at least Celeste's friends, that she was dating this famous singer. But yet, no one tried to stop it. The reason why David probably left all of this evidence in plain sight, if I had to guess, it's because he knew there were so few people around Celeste that were actually fighting for her, that were actually trying to protect her. Think about all the time she ran away, and even though people knew she was dating David, apparently, allegedly, no one tried to stop it. No one tried to get her from wherever she, quote unquote, ran away to. He probably figured no one was looking out for this poor child. And she was so neglected to the point where he could leave the evidence of her remains in plain sight and no one would even think twice about trying to search for it. He probably thought he could get away with this crime so easily because no one was out there looking to protect this young child while she was alive, running away from her home to go be with this alleged predator. That's what haunts me the most about this vile, disgusting case.